Oh, that's funny. I've been working on so many doors, and here I'm at a different place, the condo, and I'm working on more doors. Can you believe it? Every time I work on a door, I think I'm done, and I got another door to work on. Well, this door here happens to go out into the garage. Look how small that garage is. Good Lord. She can barely fit the car in there. And hey, when you live in a condo, you just be glad you got a garage at all. And this is the door that goes out into the garage. And if you notice, there's a gap under here. And the air comes through here. That's because I took the door shoe off. And here's the door shoe. And why did I take that off? Well, initially I was going to paint this door. And when I took the door shoe off, it didn't have this rubber gasket on there. And I was like, I wonder why they didn't have the rubber gasket. And my guess was that the door was rubbing and was sagging. And I look at this door and I can tell something's been going on. See how big the gap is here? Now here, look here at the bottom. There's hardly any gap there. And that's about the size of the gap that you want. About like that. See how it gets bigger here? Well, then it gets small there. That's because this has a little wonky bow to it. There's probably a shim right there, and that's not perfectly straight. Look how big the gap is here. Okay, so that tells me over time, this condo is about 15 years old. Over time, this door has sagged down. And because it's a door that goes outside, and there's a threshold here, see? Here's a nice raised threshold, and they got that. And then they put this door shoe on there. And once the door sagged, guess what? It was hard for them to close the door. And they didn't know what to do, so what do you suppose they did? They jerked this rubber seal out of there. And that seal comes separately, okay? They pulled that out. Oh, they were able to close the door. Mighty nice. But yet they let all the air in. Here we are in the winter. I was going to leave this off, and I just had this over there. It's just a towel. I'll push that up there like that, because we don't go out in the garage that often right now. And I thought after I paint the door, and I wasn't actually going to paint the door until later in the summer, because we're still in the winter, and it's going to take a while for this door to dry, because I'm going to use semi-gloss paint on the door on both sides and the door frame. What I like to do is I don't like to try to paint around door handles, the hinges, and of course I'm going to change out all this stuff. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to wait until the summer. That way I can take this off, I can paint it, I can let it set in the garage for a couple days. Maybe when Momi's off gallivanting around somewhere and she's gone for 3 or 4 days, I'll do that. And then I can let it cure before I put the hinges back on. New hinges, new doorknob, new deadbolt, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I was going to leave this. But nope. The powers on high say that the threshold needs to get, the door shoe needs to get reinstalled. I drove around to the Home Depot and to Lowe's, and do you know they used to sell these separately? And I could not find a one at either store. And I don't know if they were sold out or if they just stopped carrying them. But sometimes you have to improvise. So I went to this. When I was at the store, I found this. Okay, and that came with this rubber gasket. I have no idea who would want to screw this on the bottom of a door. And with that gasket, you would have to be absolutely 100% perfect with your clearances on the door and stuff like that to make that work, because there's no adjustment in that. See, with the door shoe like this, see, you've got a little bit of adjustment. What I like to do is when I'm installing these, I like to see that there's a slight gap underneath here when you push it up on the door. That way later on you could push it down, you could raise it up. And where you put the screws in, see the slot is kind of oblong a little bit, so you can raise or lower it if you need to readjust it. But I had this thing pushed up tight, and I put this little gasket on here, and it wasn't closing all the way. I had it 7/8 of the way closed, and I could not force that thing closed. And I'm like, okay, that's why they did it. And you know, the gap is kind of close. It's not that close, but if I raise this door up, if I raise that up, it's going to raise the bottom up, right? And so, you know, if you've been watching my videos, it's like, hey, I can do that. There's all kinds of different ways to make adjustments to a door. Okay, if I wanted to, I could trim off the bottom of the door. I could take that out in the garage, move the car, trim off maybe 1/8 of an inch to nothing from there, about halfway, and then put the door shoe back on and readjust it how I want. But some of the screw holes are going to be real close to the old screw holes from here that way. And I thought, you know, I don't really want to do that. And besides, it is slightly sagging, so I want to take the time and effort and make this door go up the best I can, because I've got a gap there. I know this door edge could be moved that way slightly, right? And if I move that door slightly that way, it's like here, and I move over here, the left-hand side is going to automatically raise up. And I've got plenty of gap up here. In fact, I got just a hair too much gap on this side as opposed to this side. And that tells me the door is sagging a little bit. And if I can raise that up just a little, I think by pushing that up tight to the bottom of the door like I had before, I think I can get it just about perfect. Okay? And let's just talk about this little shoe, this door shoe real quick. When I put these on, I try to allow for the gap, the clearance of the door. You see how I've got the rubber extended over the edge of the metal? That's because when the door closes, when this door closes, I've still got a gap there, right? I still got a gap there. Well, then you can have the weather stripping on the bottom of that extend over just a hair. That takes up that slight little gap. And so then I put it on there. And when you put those on, lots of times they slide around. And I used to put them on there and then hold my breath and hope that it didn't hit the door jamb and move over and stuff. Well, I just thought, phooey on that. I just crimp the little edges down. And right in there, I don't know if you can see, but I kind of pushed that down and kind of squeezed that down. All I did was take my my electrical cutters and put it on there at an angle and just squeezed down on it just a little, flipped it around, squeezed on it just a little, and then this can't slide back and forth and come out. And see, I've done it. You see there? I think you can see how I've already kind of pushed those down. I've already cut this to length and everything. And so I got that all set. And like I say, if you've watched any of my videos before, you'll know how I fix a sagging door. And of course, I've got all my screws here. Here I've got my sheetrock drywall coarse thread. These happen to be 3-inch, and then I got 1 1/4 inch, 2.5 inch, 1 1/4 inch. What would I possibly use those for? Well, usually I use 2.5 for interior doors, but see, this is an exterior door, and so this frame is thicker. It's way thicker here, and it's slightly thicker over here than an interior door, because the interior door is the same thickness of this all the way. See, the interior door is 3/4 all the way across, and then this door stop is just a piece of trim nailed onto this. And this is still 3/4, this is still 3/4, one whole piece. Well, see, this is notched. This is a whole piece from here to there, but it's notched, and it's got a dado little notch in there to allow for the weather stripping and stuff. And this side is maybe 3/4 to 7/8 thick, and this side is 1 1/4 to 1 3/8, 1.5 inches thick. Okay, so that's why I'm thinking I may have to use 3-inch screws in there to kind of try to suck this over if I can, depending if there's any shims in there. If there's shims in there, there's no way I can suck this over very far at all. Okay, so I know that more likely I'll try 3-inch screws or 2.5s, and see, I've got a gap here. This is the middle. This is the middle hinge. Okay, here's the middle hinge right there. And so I know I can push that over, and that'll help push the door up. See the gap there? So I can do my trick up here with the screws, my trick right here with the screws, and hopefully get this door pushed back up just enough to get the door shoe on there without having to cut the bottom of the door off. And after I do these two, after I do this hinge and this hinge, I may have to loosen up that hinge. Because see, look, it's really touching right there, isn't it? I really should have a slight gap there, shouldn't I? So that's where my 1.25 inch screws come in. I'll flop that hinge back, and I'll use 1.25 inch screws as shims. I'll take this off, and I'll put a screw right about there, and one down about there, and I'll let the head stick out just slightly from the back side of the wood after I flop this hinge back, and then I can use those 2 screws as a shim. Do you see what I mean? That way it's going to throw that hinge out at a slight angle. That's going to move the bottom of the door over. And when the bottom of the door gets moved over, guess what? A magical thing happens. You move that door over, of course it raises this side up. If you got a box and you move this side out, the whole thing, the whole box has to move. That side has to move up, that side's moving up, this side's moving that way. You take a box and you just twist it a little bit and it goes up. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I may have to do that. In fact, I may want to work on that hinge. Well, I'm going to work on that one probably first or second. And then I'll work on that one, and then I'll work on the middle one. And see, because this is an exterior door, because it goes out into the garage, we've got spring-loaded self-closing hinges. Here's one at the top. You can tell it's different than a regular hinge, okay? And usually they only put this on the door that goes from your house, your condo, to your garage. Or if you're in the garage and if you have a door that goes outside. No, that does not have self-closing hinges. The only one usually in a house is the one going between the garage and the house, okay? Just like this, okay? And you can tell that's a self-closing. I've already taken the little pins out before, okay? So there's no spring-loaded pressure on those right now. I've already taken those out of there. And to do that, you see that little hole there? That's actually for an Allen wrench, and then you just, it's like a spring-loaded deal. You just turn it a little bit, take the pin out, and then you move this over, put the pin back in, so you can take the Allen wrench out, and then do it again, and do it again, do it again, and pretty soon you let off all the pressure. You see what I mean? And so I'm gonna do all that in order to fix this, to get that adjusted properly on there, and that's how I'm going to do that. And you know, these doors take a little bit of time and effort because you've got lots of things going involved. You've got the door shoe, you've got the weather stripping that needs to be adjusted properly so you don't allow the air in. You've got self-closing hinges, you've got a deadbolt, you've got a regular handle on there. Everything's got to be adjusted properly in order for this thing to work. And you see this door? It's a heavy solid core door. Usually it's 1.75 inches thick instead of 1 3/8. Most of your interior doors are 1 3/8 hollow core doors. This one's 1 3/4, and it's a solid core door, meaning it's heavy, meaning that's why this door always sag. Always. This is 15 years old, it's sagging. And they have to make them solid core door because this is a 20-minute rated door. You look on the edge of the door or the top of the door, usually it'll have a label. Something like this stapled on there. This one happens to say 20-minute rating. Okay, it's a listed fire door, it says. Listed fire door. Okay, right there. And generally, if you don't see that tag on the side of the door, it'll either be on the side, sometimes they nail it up here on the top, and then generally on your door frame will actually be listed. You'll usually see something on the side. Now this one happens to be up on the top. See, it's a metal plate. See there, listed fire door frame, 20-minute rating. Listed fire door frame with hose stream, 20-minute rated. Okay, so this door is a 20-minute rated frame and a 20-minute rated door. That's why it's a solid core door. That's why you've got weather stripping on here. Usually this is supposed to be rated smoke seal. Then you've got to have self-closing hinges on there, at least a couple of them to get this door to close. So that's why we've got all this stuff going on, and we've got the weather stripping and the door shoe at the bottom. Okay, so I'm not going to show you every single little thing I'm going to do. I've kind of explained to you what's going on, and I think one way or another, I know I've got to work on that one. I think I'm going to work on that first. You see, I'm just going to flop that out, and I'm going to put a couple screws in there. That's why I've got my 1.25 inch drywall screws in there. So I'll do that first, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like. I used to not use screws. I used to undo the screws and kind of pry it back with a screwdriver, and then I would take some metal shims. And try to fish them behind this and kind of poke them in there to get this wedged out. And it's a big pain in the rear to try to do that without messing up your door casing and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, wait a minute, why am I doing that? Why not just use some screws? And I could put the screws in there and screw them in further or unscrew them, and there's my hinge or my shims for the door hinge. Do you see what I'm saying? All right, so I'm going to work on that now. You know what? Change of plan slightly. I'm not going to do that bottom one just yet. I think I'm going to do that one last, because if I shim that out to this, then I may have to mess with shimming that back and forth after I readjust these two. You see what I mean? I want to suck those over the best I can that way first, before I work on that. So I'm going to work on that top one first. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And because this is a solid core door, and because it's only has 3 hinges, usually 6'8" tall doors have 3 hinges, 8-foot doors have 4 hinges, I'm going to take a putty knife. I'm going to take my putty knife and my cat's paw. Okay, this here. In fact, I might take a thicker putty knife. I got a thicker one. See how much thicker that is. It's not as springy as that. I don't want to dig into the floor. I don't think I ever would, but we'll just be safe rather than sorry. I'm going to do that because when I take the top hinge off, the door has a tendency to sag because it's a solid core door. And I don't want to just jam this under there, obviously, on the finished floor. So I'm going to put a putty knife under there, right? And then I'm going to push that in as it's sliding along the putty knife. And that's just going to help hold the door. So when I take off that top hinge, hopefully the door's not going to flex too far and stuff. That's my helper. If I had somebody helping me, I would have them hold the door. But hey, I'm trying to show you how to do things on your own, okay? So now I'll be able to loosen up that top hinge.